Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Allyn Hane, president and founder at Yard Mastery. Allyn is passionate about lawn care, DIYers, YouTube, digital marketing, and social media. His YouTube channel, The Lawn Care Nut, started as a hobby and now has over 500,000 subscribers, where he helps homeowners learn about DIY lawn care. He also has his own brand, Yard Mastery Incorporated, bringing niche brands direct to consumer using Shopify. We spoke about how he started in digital marketing, lawn care, product development, and the creator economy. Allyn has an extensive knowledge of lawn care as well as digital marketing, and just an overall great guy to speak with. Please welcome to the podcast, Allyn Hane, the Lawn Care Nut. You're listening to the Agency X podcast, and I'm your host, John Sertikowski, founder and CEO at Avix, an e-commerce agency for high-growth brands. My goal is to provide insight into e-commerce, technology, business, and everything in between. Make sure you subscribe to be notified about new episodes and visit our website, avixdesigns.com.
Yeah, so my name is Allyn Hane. On the internet, I go by the Lawn Care Nut, and that's a YouTube channel. And I started that back in 2009. But the way it came about is I worked for a company called TruGreen outside of Chicago. So I'm born and raised in Florida, but for 15 years I lived in Chicago, or outside of Chicago, Northwest Indiana, over by there. That's what we kind of say. You New Yorkers, you got an accent, but the Chicagoans, they got their own accent too. Sounds kind of like this, like that, a couple, 2-3 times a week. And so I lived up there for 15 years, and I worked for a company called TruGreen. We sprayed lawns. And this was back in, I worked there like 1998 to the early 2000s. And so the internet wasn't what it is then. There was no mobile phones in 98, 99. So the internet was really different. But working for TruGreen was very interesting. I learned how lawn care worked. I learned how grass worked. I learned that I have a passion for lawns and grass, and that was all fun. But I didn't like corporate lawn care. I just didn't like it. And so as the internet started getting bigger, I thought, man, I would like to be able to do something online, have a blog. And the way that came about is customers would be calling in during the day, angry or upset about the way their lawn looked for whatever reason. And I'd be trying to help them customer service wise, and they wouldn't believe me. I would say, your lawn is brown because you're not watering properly. And they would say, no, you burned it. Those are like, those types of things. And people just wouldn't believe me. They didn't see TruGreen as an authority in lawn care. We were just a price leader. That's all we were. Cheap price. Yeah, get your lawn looking good. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll start a blog. And so in 2008, 2007, I started a blog. And what I would do is I would answer the questions that I got during the day from customers. I would answer them in the blog. And that way, when customers would call and not believe me, I would go, well, you know what? Go on the internet and see what this dude is saying. He's going to agree with me because people believed the internet, even though it was anonymous. That was my original thought. Never really worked that way, but it ended up that I wrote dozens and dozens of articles, how to fertilize your lawn, how to turn your lawn green, how to kill weeds. Well, then I start getting this organic traffic. And so like 2008, 2009, I'm getting 15,000 visits a month to my blog. And I had no idea why, but I was like, wow, I ought to be able to monetize this. And so I start going around searching how to make money online, like everybody does, those keywords. And I came across all kind of courses and names of gurus and all this kind of stuff. And eventually met a guy that taught me SEO. And it was a one-on-one thing. And he actually was a Google hater. He hated Google. He taught me how to game PageRank. People don't even know what PageRank is anymore. But we used to buy, defunct domains that still had PR3 and 4, and we would change the content up and then link them to our sites and juice them and rank. And so much fun. You get your site to number 1 ranking for a juicy keyword, and a day later you get the index. So it was fun, and it was the early days of the internet. And I learned actually how to love Google from that, because I thought, why don't I just start giving the algorithm what they want? Like, I can give them great content. Why am I trying to fight this? And so that just became a journey of learning digital marketing all on my own. And started doing really well. Sold that blog in 2010 for, at that time, what was life-changing money. And I invested all of that money into more training. I bought domains. I started making websites. I also started taking on some client work. I was living in Northwest Indiana at that time, still working for TruGreen during the day. And at night, I'd be out there banging out content and doing, Google local listings and everything else for people. And in 2012, I got a call, or one of my neighbors said, hey, there's a guy starting a digital marketing agency in Naperville, Illinois. It was called Dealer Inspire, launched digital marketing, but it turned to Dealer Inspire. He's starting a digital marketing agency. They're going to do digital marketing for auto dealers. You ought to go talk to this guy. And so I did, and he was meeting, his company was like literally meeting in the library in Naperville, Illinois. And I went and talked to him, and he hired me as his first vice president and a leader of SEO and digital development for this company. I was the 9th employee. So I left a 15-year career at TrueGreen where I was moving up the ladder. I was in regional management, took a huge pay cut to go work for this tiny little startup company as employee number 9. That was in 2012. And then that company, I worked there for 6 years. And during that time, it was acquired by Cars.com and taken public. I think it was acquired for $150 million in 6 years. And I got to watch that grow. I didn't have equity or anything. I wasn't smart enough to do any of that stuff, but I got to see that startup grow from nothing to something. And I learned true digital marketing, paid search, Facebook pay, everything I didn't know besides SEO. The other thing that happened when I was working for that agency is I wasn't working for TrueGreen anymore. So now the cuffs were off, non-compete, right? So I could start doing videos. I'd wanted to do videos a lot earlier, but when you're working for a company like TrueGreen and you're a regional manager, you can't very well be on video on YouTube telling people all the secrets. So once I ended up getting to the point where I wasn't working for TrueGreen anymore, now I could go ahead and do videos. And so I did videos for a while, and nobody cared. So my first video was like 2009, and nobody cared for 6, 7, 8 years. There was no DIY lawn care interest on YouTube. But eventually it did happen in about 2015, 16, people started caring. And because I was the first one and the only one that had been making content on DIY lawn care, I was the recipient of all of the audience. And that was really nice. And so by now I knew how to monetize. I started doing ebooks. That was the first thing I did, was sell ebooks, thousands of ebooks on how to take care of your lawn. That ebook has now been developed into an app that we have. And so now we're getting into Yard Mastery. So it started as an ebook. And then once the ebook took off, then I said, well, I'll just take my philosophies on the ebook, what to put down and when to put it down, and I'll put that into an app. And so now we built logic into the app. So now people can download our Yard Mastery app, and it'll give them a custom lawn program based on soil temperature. They can get a soil test. We'll tell them what fertilizer to put down and when, everything through the app. So that's part of it. And then, yes, an e-commerce business to develop around that. So in 2018, I have a business partner. His name is Josh Whitford, and he actually got through the same exact training I did. We met each other learning SEO years ago, and it was just in 2018 we finally came together to make this business Yard Mastery. And that's when we started, getting products and things like that and warehousing. We can get into all that if you want, but there you go. That's kind of the backstory. I would just tell you that I listened to Gary Vaynerchuk through all of that. And so he was really the biggest inspiration for everything I did. I kind of followed his philosophies and his guidance, not personally, but, just from his books and everything. And now we have this really cool business.
Awesome. No, that's a great background. And a lot of that I didn't know, right? I of course looked up your bio, looked up a little bit about, and you speak about TrueGreen, and you speak about, the on the YouTube channel and everything. But I didn't know about the digital marketing history until recently. And it's funny that you say that you started a blog, because I used to work in corporate advertising and for pharmaceutical companies, right? And now we do a lot of fashion work. We do a lot of various other things in e-commerce, but I hated it, right? I really did not like the process. So I started my blog too to write about web design and development. And that's really what went from just me being like a freelancer to, a 40-person agency now. So similar there too. This was probably around 2012 where I got really into SEO. And I would say SEO is what launched my business. It was one of the biggest things, focusing on keywords. And even to this day, a lot of the traffic comes from that. So that was extremely smart. And, one thing I wanted to kind of ask about is you got into YouTube as a creator, and the creator economy is blowing up right now. It's huge. A lot of our clients, some of them are creators, and then they started e-commerce. I'm curious about when the products came into play, because I know Yard Mastery is your products that you create, and I think there's some other product lines in there too, like Next, which is awesome. I have a lot of those stuffs. The biostimulants, they work great. Curious, did the products come first, or you started to do YouTube to support that, or did you grow the YouTube channel and become a creator first and then start to introduce product?
Yeah, it's a great question, because this is where they call us influencers. None of us like that term, but that's just what we are, or what they call us. So the biggest challenge I find, because I talk to a lot of other creators in different niches, but mostly in DIY home improvement stuff, the biggest challenge they have is, how do I take this audience? I have this audience on TikTok or YouTube or wherever it is. How do I monetize the audience? And the way you have to monetize it is you have to get them off of that platform and bring them into something that you have control over. For me, that was an email list. That was number one. And I still recommend that today. An email list is your number one thing to start. Because once you have somebody's email, now you can advertise to them on Facebook. You can obviously email them directly. There's a lot of things you can do with that. We also have an app, so that's another way that we were able to get those folks. But the way it all started was, originally I was only going to sell ebooks and e-products, because obviously all margin, no cost of goods. But over time, the audience told me what they wanted. So within the ebook, because I tell people what to put on their lawn, it's fertilizer, right? So originally I would use store-bought fertilizers that I found a couple of fertilizers that were available in most of the country. So I was able to tell people, you can go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you can get this fertilizer. And I'll tell the name of it. It was Milorganite, Milwaukee Organic Nitrogen. Anybody that's ever watched any of my stuff knows about Milorganite. They know I love the smell of it and all of these things. They're still a partner of mine today. Yeah, they're still a partner of mine today. They're still the number one most used fertilizer in our app. So I would do that. Well, what happened was Milorganite sold out around the country. This was like 4 years ago. Literally, you couldn't find it anywhere. And so the audience was like, hey, we need something that's not going to sell out. And as well as, we need something that's not just a one-trick pony. We need some other blends here, some other things. So I went to work and I started looking for, how can I create my own line of fertilizer, my own Scott's 4-step, for example, which is the big market right now. If you go to any Home Depot or Lowe's, it's all Scott's 4-step for the most part. I thought, how do I do that? So I started learning. I started figuring that out. And what I learned early on is, nobody would talk to me. All gatekeepers everywhere. Oh, you're just a YouTuber. They wouldn't even return my calls, nothing. I was like, okay, interesting. So I met John Perry. He is the owner of Greene County Fertilizer. Those are liquid fertilizers and biostimulants. And he is what I call a believer. He believed in me. He believed in what we could do as a YouTuber, as an influencer, whatever term you want to put on it. And the nice thing about him was, he was willing to drop ship for me. So, because when I couldn't create my own products at first, I thought, I got to find somebody to drop ship. And so he did. They set up a full shipping operation in there. They're just a manufacturer of fertilizer, but they took all the investment and invested in the ability to do shipping for us. That was what they put in. And so then what I put in with that was my audience, and we grew together, and we did a lot of business together. And then over time, people would say, well, we want more than liquids. We want granular, because that's where the audience really is. And that's where the most of people purchase, is granular. So it took a couple years, but by then I had some capital. And then also my name about what I did with Milorganite and what we were doing with Greene County started getting out. And now the fertilizer companies are calling me, and everybody wants me to sell their stuff. However, I learned a lesson, and that is when you sell somebody else's stuff, that's cool. Even if you have really good agreements in place where you have an exclusive or whatever it is, it's still their brand. They still control it. And I thought, I want to control my own destiny as much as possible. So I worked really, really hard to go ahead and invest and put in the capital to create my own brand. And that's what Yard Mastery is. And so Yard Mastery has its own 4-step, 5-step fertilizer program that we've created from scratch. And now we have suppliers that we buy from, and we buy truckloads and things like that. And it's not so much of a problem. But I would just like to say, there's so many barriers, especially in fertilizer. This is an industry that hasn't been disrupted. The lawn care industry, like taxi cabs have been disrupted by Uber and hotels by Airbnb. The lawn care industry hasn't been disrupted yet. So that's why I hit a lot more barriers, I think, than a lot of other creators might.
It's all organics, which is kind of cool, but it doesn't really give you that pro level. It gives you that basic maintenance. And you guys, especially Yard Mastery, and I got the app, and it really helps with like scheduling and timing, which is super important in lawn care. Measuring the soil temperature, I didn't even know soil test existed, right? Until I saw, okay, I could do a soil test, and it tells you so much. So finding that balance, like you could just go to Home Depot and pick up like Scott's, but like I found out that I had a lawn that was insanely high in phosphorus, right? So I bought a no phos fertilizer, right? And I threw it down with some Milorganite too. So it had a little bit in there, but just learning those things from the channel and also gaining customer trust. I think one of the biggest things with creators is, sometimes influencers will come out with products that they kind of pretend to stand behind, but maybe they don't use, or they're just being paid to promote it. But when I see like products like yours and a lot of other like content creators out there, like look at Mr. Beast, he created Feastables, which is amazing right now, and it's blowing up. But he created that because it solved a problem for him when it comes to his diet and when it comes to what he eats and what he's allergic to. Same thing for you. You created something that you would want to use, that you stand behind, and I think that speaks volumes. And people could kind of see through the noise when it comes to someone who's just promoting a product and someone who really stands behind a product and really believes in it. So that's something that I felt stood out for the content that you're putting out there. And so created the products, you launched them. Can you tell me a little bit? I know you mentioned about the formulation and the logistics. That's something I think a lot of young entrepreneurs or people getting into e-commerce, whether they're creators or not, that is a high barrier of entry of being like, okay, well, I have a brand or I have an idea. Can you tell me a little bit about the process of like, after you stopped like white labeling or private labeling, I'm sorry, and drop shipping, what was the next step of actually formulating this? And then, do you ship it out yourself? Do you have a warehouse? How does that kind of work? Because that's something I think our listeners would really like to hear about.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I want to go back and I'll talk to you a little bit about Sunday and Mr. Beast too when we get toward, because you're hitting on some things that I think are really cool to expound on. But the way it started was, so we started with ebooks, and that was able to grow capital. You have to have capital if you're going to sell your own products and warehouse them. You have to invest in that. You have to invest in inventory. So it took me a while to save that money. That was the first thing, and then the drop shipping obviously allowed us to get some money. But what I did first is we hired a 3PL. So we sell fertilizer. Now, fertilizer, people are scared of that because of Timothy McVeigh in Oklahoma City many years ago was a fertilizer. People are scared of it. So a lot of 3PLs, even though what we sell is the same thing as in the store, it's not that stuff. But anyway, a lot of 3PLs wouldn't touch us at all because it was fertilizer. But we did find one that would, and they were very good to us at first. And I say that, they solved the problem for us. We didn't have the capital to open warehouses and hire people for that and buy boxes. And I had no good deals with FedEx or any of those things. And I didn't even know how that stuff worked. So we had a 3PL and we were with them for 2 years, and we basically just deconstructed what they were doing and realized eventually we could do it cheaper. And so again, we just saved more money while we watched what they were doing. And then we were able to open our own warehouses. So we have one warehouse here in Florida that's ours. And then we have a new partner. They're not new now, but we found a new partner in South Carolina that pretty much just works with big bag stuff, and we work with them. So we found a different 3PL for that, but they're a little bit cheaper. So that's kind of how we're growing. I would have been opening more warehouses around the country so I could get better shipping rates. But just with the way the economy is right now, we're kind of just holding back on that. But eventually that's what we'll start doing, is opening more warehouses around the country. And another thing I learned was my fertilizers themselves. Originally, I was trying to go for these really complicated fertilizers that you couldn't find anywhere and really cool ingredients and this and this and that. But what you learn is when you do that, when you make your product too complicated, it can only be sourced from one place. Well, now let's say that one place is in Kentucky. Well, now when you open a warehouse in California, if you can only get your fertilizer made in one place, it costs you too much to ship it to California to your warehouse. So what you have to do is you have to make a fertilizer that can be manufactured anywhere. And so that's what I've had to do, is strike that balance between making my stuff super cool and super funky fresh and really rare, but also being able to be made anywhere so that as we expand, I can actually have a fertilizer blender right next to every warehouse. That would be perfect, right? So I don't have to pay that extra trucking cost. So those are some of the things I've learned over time. And that's what we've come up with our fertilizer blends too. The way I look at the fertilizer I sell, two things is, number one is our soil test is what I call our Scott's spreader. I always like to bring this out. So the reason that Scott's is the number one player in the market is because you go to Home Depot and you buy a Scott's spreader and it works perfectly with Scott's fertilizers. It just makes sense. And so once somebody has that spreader, they're locked into Scott's ecosystem. It's very tough for them to leave because of that comfort, because there's no fear there. It breaks down their fear. My Scott's spreader is our soil test. So once you get a soil test from us, now we know exactly what your soil needs. There can't be anyone that can recommend anything better than me and my app, because I know exactly what you need. So that is my Scott spreader, is my soil test. You'll stay with me because I know exactly what your soil needs, not too much, not too little. So I bring that out. I lost my train of thought on the other piece of it,
No, that makes
but yeah,
sense.
that's kind of how we.
That makes sense, and I
Yeah, so we're trying
I
to.
like that idea about creating a product that is sticky, that kind of like brings you into the ecosystem, similar to how like both tools and lawn care products like Ryobi or Milwaukee or all the other, or Toro, especially with the batteries. Like once you buy
Batteries.
one, that's it. You bought into the system, and everything is going to be.
Yep.
And that people like that too. That's a good thing. It's consistent, and that really works. You did want.
I remember the thing I was going to tell you. It's
Okay,
important. I
good.
want to get this out.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the yeah the so the way I look at our fertilizer is like craft beer. So, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about. So Scott's is Budweiser or Miller Lite, right? It's everywhere. And if you follow craft beer, I'm not a craft beer nerd anymore. I'm too old. My liver can't handle it anymore. But back in the day, I used to really follow craft beer and get into it. And on tap handles at like a Chili's or a Applebee's, it used to just be Miller Lite, Bud Light, right? That was all there was. Then all of a sudden, Sam Adams starts showing up on tap handles. And I was like, huh, this is interesting. Well, now you go to a Chili's and they'll have a couple IPAs and everything else, right? That's craft beer taking over the industry. But the first was Sam Adams. That's how I see us, is we're not that super triple IPA that's going to burn your face off or some crazy barley wine, but we're also not Budweiser. We're Sam Adams. We're right there in the middle. And that's how I look at my brand. I'm the Sam Adams of fertilizer.
That is a great analogy. Really, really good. That's perfect with Budweiser, Scotts. I went to the Sam Adams Brewery actually once in Boston, and it was amazing. It's really cool. They did a whole tour. They let you taste it. It was great.
It's a cool operation.
So you mentioned you wanted to talk about a little bit about Sunday and Mr. Beast and some of the stuff I mentioned there. What were some of your thoughts on that?
So with Mr. Beast, I'm glad you brought him up, because so Sunday is a brand, and you mentioned they're organic. They're actually not. They come
Oh,
across
really?
as their marketing is all natural and all this, but actually
Mm.
it's not. Um, so anyway, the thing about Sunday is, and Mr. Beast says this, they are a traditional brand. So the traditional way a brand came to market is you create a product, you make it look all pretty, and then you have to spend a bunch of money creating an audience for it and creating demand. The way their creator economy works is the creator builds the audience and the trust, then bolts the brand on top of that, so he has a built-in audience and sales. And so that's Mr. Beast's model. That's what he talks about. Mr. Beast says, hey, in the future, when you go into a Walmart and you look for a candy bar, you will see Feastables. Oh, I know Mr. Beast. I'm just going to buy that because I know Mr. Beast immediately. Even though he has a little, and what do you get when you get Mr. Beast? A little bit better ingredients. He doesn't tell you that he's perfect, but he's a little bit better than Hershey's. And that's what my fertilizer is. It's a little bit better than the current production that's out there. And hopefully when you see my stuff on shelves, you'll buy because you know me. Um, that's the difference. And so Sunday's kind of coming into the market the traditional way, whereas I brought mine to market through the creator economy.
Yeah, yeah, very different there. Very different there. Is that something that you're looking to do? Is get onto shelves at all? I'm not sure if you are right now, but are you trying to get into retail locations?
We're looking at it now this year for the first time ever. I used to think I'm only going to be e-commerce. I learned so much there. So example, we first started shipping 45-pound bags. You can't ship
Yeah.
50s. A 50-pound bag, when you go over 50 pounds with UPS or FedEx, they charge like a $10 or a $15 service charge or heavy item fee. And so when you have a 50-pound bag plus a box, you're over 50. So we learned really quick, we need to ship 45s. So I had everything I had made in 45s. And I thought, I'm going to dominate this market. Because when we first came in a couple of years ago, no one was shipping big bags fertilizer wise. You could go on Amazon and you could buy small bags, tiny ones, but you couldn't buy anything big. I'm like, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to take over the market with big bags. And we did. And we blasted out 45-pound bags. Well, what we eventually learned was that's good, but there's a reason there's only small bags on Amazon, because you can put 2 small bags in a box and you can double down on the shipping and you can give people discounts, and you learn don't ship air. And so that's all the e-commerce we had to learn, is that there's a reason why nobody's shipping these big giant bags. Now we still do it, but when we do bundle things, we can give customers a lot more discounts. We can do a lot more fun stuff in the box, put in prizes, things like that. So that's kind of some of our journey that way. But I've also learned with e-commerce, I'm still at the mercy of FedEx and their gas prices and whatever else. And it just hammers down on my margins. So that's when I started thinking, man, maybe we should try retail. And I mean, we have Ace store owners reach out to us quite often. Ace stores are big believers because they saw what we did with Milorganite. So yeah, we're looking to do that. I just need to to hire the right person for that, because I don't understand retail at all. So I need to just find the right person that does and bring them on and let them do their thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good mindset right there, is just understanding what you don't know, because there's a lot of e-commerce brands right now, and it's a big conversation in the community, in the e-commerce community, about going into brick and mortar locations in retail because of like changes to iOS 14 and how Facebook ads aren't working as much anymore, and their margins and their like cost of acquisition is getting crushed. So a lot of brands are like, how are we going to grow? And the next logical step would be to get into stores. But it's a completely different beast. It's completely different than just shipping your own products direct to consumer. There's different billings, there's different logistics, and it's a whole other thing. And if there's one piece of advice from there that I would pull out for other brands that are considering that, is to hire that person or that consultant or that person who has that experience with brick and mortar, because it's a whole different world and you have to know how to navigate it. And that's something that could be a little tricky. And I think there's a lot of politics involved too when it comes to trying to get into locations, where your product is going to live on the shelf and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. So I've done some research with the idea of fighting for that shelf space. I'm hoping that what I can tell people is, or tell these buyers is, well, listen, if you put Scott's on your shelf, does the CEO of Scott's get up and say, go to the Ace store in Springfield, Illinois, we're fully stocked there? He doesn't do that, but I do. And the other idea is back to the Mr. Beast. When people go into the store, hopefully they'll recognize my brand over anyone else's, and then they'll have a better trust there. So that's kind of what we're hoping with the retail. The other thing is, going into retail, is your cash flow changes. So right now, when somebody buys a bag of fertilizer from me, they pay up front before I ever even ship it. So I get my money immediately. But when I start shipping truckloads to Home Depot warehouse or wherever it is, I'm probably going to have to be on 60-day AR. And so that's going to change our whole cash flow and everything else. We really need to approach that business carefully.
Yeah. There's that cash flow is extremely important. And I think, I forgot the term, it's like reverse cash flow, or where you get paid first before you have to pay the bills for that product. And that's where a lot of companies can become really successful with managing that cash flow. There's actually a couple of really interesting products you may want to check out. One of them is called Parker. It's actually a credit card, and it allows you to make larger purchases for wholesale. But what's different from other credit cards is that they have net 60 and net 90 terms to pay them back. So basically, if you're paying your wholesaler, your whomever you're, for the actual product, and you're on net 30, net 60 terms, and the credit card could allow for 90, now you have that I forgot the exact term, but you're getting paid before you have to pay your bills. So you're never in the hole. You're never funding the products as much. So that kind of thinking, where I think a lot of like younger e-commerce brands tend to just focus on brand and getting product out and revenue, and not like considering margins and paying people back and paying the bills, which I think is, one of the most important parts of running a business. So it's good that you kind of are thinking 3 to 5 steps ahead before just jumping into getting your product in store.
Yeah, it's cool. One of the things you mentioned, John, you say so many things that I like to go back to. You said Facebook ads don't work the way they used to. They don't if you don't have an email list. So what you do, so I'm telling you, the email match is so valuable, because when you have your own cohort, when you have your own audience that's large enough, it's easy to make your ads easier to make your ads relevant. I think the challenge is people are using Facebook's audience targeting, and it's garbage, especially if you're in because they've done away with so much of what you used to be able to target. But when you have your own email list, you don't really suffer from that, because you have your own data. And so we're also in a niche that's not heavily advertised in. You'd think lawn care is, but it's not. And so anybody trying to get into the market, I'll mention Sunday again, I see them wasting tons of money on who they're targeting, again, going after all that organics, and all you see are people in the comments talking about how grass is evil and everything. And I'm like, yeah, you guys, you don't have an audience, so you don't know how to target.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha. I say that they're a competitor, so.
Yeah, I think that first party data is something a lot of brands need to be able to focus on. The email list, or we're seeing a lot of, and I actually invested in this company called Inveterate. We're seeing a lot of e-commerce brands spin up memberships, so paid memberships, so that you could own that first-party data, give special VIP perks to those members, and have reoccurring revenue for it. It doesn't have to be a large amount of money. It could be like, $20 a year, $100 a year or something. And maybe they have access to specialized content, early product drops, specialized formulations, or certain things that you may be working on that only some of your VIP most loyal customers will find. So a lot of fashion brands are doing this now with having REI does it too with their yearly co-op program. You pay $30 and you get access to all of these different things. So building that first party data and that loyalty, then you're kind of immune to anything that happens with, social platforms shutting down or like TikTok. TikTok might get banned in the United States, and there's so many people that have all of their followers on TikTok and don't have that first party data. So I think that's extremely important to kind of diversify where your attention is coming from and diversify all of that your customer data.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Another question I had was, as far as your marketing background, I wasn't aware of that, and then I looked it up on LinkedIn, and I saw you were VP of marketing. You mentioned for a car dealership. Are you full-time on Lawn Care Nut and Yard Mastery, or do you still dabble in working for other companies when it comes to digital marketing?
No, this is my full-time job since 2018. Yeah. So we started, so the Lawn Care Nut is just my personality, and it has some revenue through sponsorships and brand partnerships and things, but I started Yard Mastery with my business partner, Josh, so we could have something that could live on outside of me. Eventually, I'm going to age out of this, or like you said, an algorithm is going to change somewhere, and I'm not going to want to have to learn it or whatever it is. And so we wanted to create a brand that could live on outside of me. And so that's what Yard Mastery is. It started getting revenue in 2019 for the first time. So, but yeah, that's my full-time job, is just that.
Excellent. That's amazing. I love that, just because similar to my background where I was in it, working the 9 to 5, which is great. Anyone could work a 9 to 5 if that's what you prefer, but needed to break out of that. And it's always great to hear how someone kind of almost turned a side hustle and a passion into their primary source of income and something that they love. So I absolutely appreciate that. Any advice that you would have to young creators or young brands that are just starting out? What would be some of the number one things that you would want them to focus on right now to help set them up for success?
So the biggest one, like I kind of mentioned, we touched on it, is you got to find a way to put names to these people. Get them somewhere that if whatever your platform is changes, or like even YouTube right now, I feel like YouTube doesn't even care about 7 to 10 minute content anymore. It's all 1 minute or podcasts. Yeah. Well, that's shaking up a lot of people. So find a way to get those your audience, your customers, whatever you want to call them, find a way to get them into an email list. That's the first thing. Other than that, I would say don't spend tons of money at first, and don't just, it's easy for a creator to start getting a lot of views, and you start getting a lot of attention, and you get a lot of brand deals, and that can go away. That's very fleeting. So you want to try to build something that can live on. That's a real business. People will say that to me often. We talk to different people and they'll go, "Congratulations on building a real business," because so many people they talk to, they think their real business is AdSense money. And yes, that can be a real business, but you're not really controlling anything there. So I would say work on that. Build a real business, something that lives on outside of you, that you can still push and work on. And then from there, don't spend money foolishly, and learn how to be a good operator. Gary Vaynerchuk talks about that a lot, right? A lot of people can get views, they can drive traffic, but they don't know how to operate an actual business. And this goes back to what you were saying, John. If you're not somebody that knows how to run a P&L, you don't know how to create a sales plan, you don't know how to track, you have to hire somebody to do that for you, so you can continue to do what you do, which is make content.
Yeah, 100%. Focus on what you know. And if you can't learn the things that you're not good at, then maybe in the early stages you had to. I had to be forced to learn how to read a P&L, how to do taxes, and all of these other things, until you're able to hire people that are going to be able to do those things for you. Okay, last question. What's next for Yard Mastery? I know you said you're working on some different things. Anything new coming out? Anything you wanted to tell people about?
Yeah, so the retail play will be big, but our next biggest investment, we made an investment this year in 2022 in a soil lab. So they do our soil tests. So we invested in them so we could continue to grow them. So that was our big investment for this year. They're called My Soil. However, we're coming up this year. I'm really interested in the robot mower scene. I think this is the disruptor of lawn care, and I have some pretty big opinions about it that are positive ones. But the robot mower is going to take over the industry, and it's going to be reaching customers that are not currently reached by old school brands. Everybody thinks battery technology is where things are going, and batteries are nice, but it's really the robot mower. The robot mower does run on a battery, but it's the convenience that it brings. So I'm already talking to a couple different companies. I look at this like the auto business. So when I worked for my agency, we did digital marketing for auto dealerships. So I had eyes on hundreds of dealerships. I was in the dealerships. I understand how they work. And the auto business is a very interesting business. I'll just say it that way. There's a reason people don't like buying cars, but it's an interesting business. But what I learned, though, was franchises. I learned about OEMs, or original equipment manufacturers. I studied Southeast Toyota distributors who distribute all the Toyotas in the Southeast, and I understand how they work with their dealerships. And I want to put that model into robot mowers. I want to have robot mower dealerships around the country. And so just as you would go to buy a car, you go to the dealership. Now, we won't run them that way, but you go to the dealership to buy your robot mower, and then we'll service your robot mower for you. So I see it like that. So I'm actively looking to start importing robot mowers.
Oh,
That's
man.
the next big thing.
I don't know how I feel about that, man. I feel so. I've been seeing this online. I saw your video on it and a couple of others posting about robot mowers. And part of me is like, because I like new technology. Like I got a Tesla, and I love the self-driving. I like the ideas around it. Like I'm in the tech space, so I like the idea of a mower that's gonna do that for me. But at the same time, I still love mowing my lawn. Like I'm sad that it's November now, and I'm like, maybe I'll get one more in because it's still growing a little bit. But like I think a lot of people love that. So I think you're right. It's going to be big, and a lot of people are going to use it. And I feel like they're just like with electric cars, like EVs versus regular cars with engines. I think there's probably going to be those two sides that are like, hardcore people who are just using their Toro gas mowers. And then just like now, there's a lot of people who don't want to switch over to battery. There's going to be a lot of people who are like, hey, I'm not touching that thing. I want to be able to mow myself. But there's going to be a huge, huge crowd that is like, hey, I just want to press a button and have it set my height, and it's just going to go. So I think it's going to be an interesting space to see how it plays out. That's pretty cool.
I agree. I mean, you can see, enjoy the mow. I love to mow also. So I'm not going to put one of these on my lawn right away. Well, I actually am to test it. But what I think about it is you're definitely not the target audience. But just because you have the robot mower, you can turn it off for a week and mow yourself. But then when, if things get busy at home or at work and you're not home for the weekend, you just turn the robot on and it picks up for you. So that's kind of the halfway model. But what we're finding so far, the biggest, because we're doing some tests around neighborhoods with Brett, who works with me, and he has people stop by his house all the time. And overwhelmingly, the people that stop by to ask him about what he does are IT people who run, IT for large companies around here, infrastructure,
Wow.
people like that. They love the idea of it. They want to get it out there. They want to hack it. And this is not one or two people. This is a lot of people that this is where they're at. And so that's going to be the first, are the people that like the technology, like to hack it. And then what happens is once it gets on somebody's lawn and you start mowing it really low, and you can do this with St. Augustine grass too, the lawn looks so incredible because it's cut every single day. So it eliminates weeds. The lawn looks immaculate. It's just so much better. And again, I'm selling them here, but the neighbors all want one. They just do. It's one of those things. It's the cool factor. Yeah. It's the early adopter, and then the whatever they call them, early and late, and all. There's those terms that you can use from. So that's what happens. People really want to get on board, and it just spreads.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be early on that train.
I mean, I'm sold. I'm sold. I mean, I said I don't know. I like mowing, but I like the idea of being like, well, I have to go for the day and just let it run, or I want to just sit on the porch and drink a beer and watch it happen. And it's probably going to be pretty consistent. I could imagine, like right now, there's like, you have some divots, you have some things that you always miss a spot sometimes, especially I'm new into it, so it's not always perfect. But if you have a robot doing it, it's a different story. So I'm excited about that. Allyn, I think we covered anything you wanted to touch on?
No, I think we're good. Thank you, John. I mean, if people want to find me, they can find us at Yard Mastery. We have training, yard care boot camp. So I still sell a lot of training, things like that. eBooks. Our app is called Yard Mastery. But no, it's fun. I don't get to talk this way often.
Yeah, that's
I'm
why I
kind
thought
of
it was a good
rusty at
idea.
talking this way. Like I used
No, it's
to,
great.
I used to do keynotes and stuff and about digital marketing, and now I'm just so in my own little world. So I like breaking out and talking this,
That's great.
whatever you call this kind of talk nowadays. I I
Yeah,
enjoy it.
no, I think it's great. I think it's perfect crossover because, one, I'm sure there's lawn care people out there that are still in the e-commerce space, like people like me. And I think there's a lot of people who don't understand what goes behind, the creator economy, the e-commerce, the logistics behind it. So, this was a great conversation, and I'm really happy that you were able to join, and I think our listeners really like it. The websites where you could find Allyn are yardmastery.com and also the Lawn Care Nut, and we'll link them in the bottom, and check them out on YouTube because I learned a lot.
Thank you, John.
Thanks so much, Allyn. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Agency X podcast. I really hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please make sure to subscribe. If you want to learn more about our services, you could find me on LinkedIn. You could also find me on Twitter @jserta or visit our website avexdesigns.com.